You spend years building a version of yourself that the world will accept. You adjust your dreams to fit what seems realistic. You silence the voice that whispers about meaning, about purpose, about something larger than survival. Society rewards this compliance with comfort, with approval, with the illusion of security. And slowly, without noticing, you become a stranger to yourself, living someone else's definition of a good life, while your soul starves for significance. But what if this existential numbness isn't a personal failure? What if it's the predictable result of abandoning the one thing that makes life worth living? Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, discovered something profound in the darkest corner of human experience: that humans can endure almost any suffering if they have a reason why. He found that meaning isn't something you stumble upon in comfort. It's forged in the tension between who you are and who you're called to become. Frankl watched people survive unimaginable horror, not because they were stronger, but because they had discovered their unique purpose. Those who found meaning in their suffering didn't just survive, they emerged transformed, more alive than those who had never faced such depths. He realized that the absence of meaning creates a void more painful than any external circumstance, a vacuum that modern society fills with distraction, consumption, and endless busyness. In this video, we're going to explore why running from your purpose creates more suffering than pursuing it ever could. You'll discover the 3 sources of meaning that sustain you through any crisis, why your fear of purpose is actually fear of freedom, and how embracing the tension between who you are and who you could become is the only path to authentic fulfillment. If you're new to the channel and haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button and like this video to support our work. Thank you for your support. Now let's dive into the hidden battle that determines whether you merely exist or truly live. Picture a tightrope stretched across a chasm. On one side stands who you currently are: comfortable, familiar, predictable. On the other side waits the person you're meant to become: uncertain, demanding, terrifying in its potential. Most people never step onto that rope. They convince themselves the chasm isn't real, that staying where they are is the safer choice. But Frankl understood something crucial. Refusing to walk that rope doesn't eliminate the tension. It internalizes it, turning it into a quiet desperation that follows you everywhere. This is the truth Frankl discovered in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany. Stripped of everything: identity, possessions, dignity, even the certainty of living another day, he observed a pattern. Some prisoners collapsed into despair almost immediately. Others, facing identical circumstances, found reserves of strength that seemed impossible. The difference wasn't physical constitution or even previous life experience. It was whether they had answered a fundamental question: what am I living for? Consider someone who spends decades in a career that pays well but drains their spirit. Every morning requires a negotiation with themselves, convincing the part that yearns for meaning to be quiet for just one more day. They tell themselves they'll pursue their real purpose later, when circumstances are better, when they have more security, when they're ready. But Frankl would recognize this pattern immediately. They're not waiting for the right time, they're fleeing from freedom itself. Or think about the person who has everything society says should make them happy: success, relationships, comfort, yet feels an inexplicable emptiness. They try to fill it with achievements, with purchases, with experiences. Nothing works because they're medicating a symptom while ignoring the disease. The emptiness isn't depression in the clinical sense. It's what Frankl called the existential vacuum, the soul's response to a life without meaning. Frankl saw human nature with unusual clarity. We are not primarily driven by pleasure, as Freud suggested, nor by power, as Adler claimed. We are driven by meaning. Take away our purpose and we become capable of any degradation. Give us meaning and we can endure any suffering. This isn't philosophical speculation. Frankl witnessed it in the most brutal laboratory imaginable, the death camps where humanity was stripped to its essence. In his clinical observations after the war, Frankl identified a disturbing pattern. His patients didn't lack for material comfort. They lived in relative peace and prosperity, yet they suffered from what he termed noogenic neurosis, psychological illness arising not from trauma or chemical imbalance, but from meaninglessness. They described their lives as empty, futile, without direction. Traditional psychotherapy often failed them because it addressed symptoms without touching the core problem. These people had never discovered their unique purpose. The cases that improved shared a common thread. They stopped trying to eliminate discomfort and started asking different questions. Not, how can I feel better? But what am I being called to do? Not how do I escape this suffering, but what meaning can I find within it? The The shift from seeking comfort to seeking meaning transformed their relationship with life itself. Yet modern culture sells a dangerous illusion that the path to fulfillment runs through eliminating all friction, all challenge, all discomfort. Optimize your life, maximize pleasure, minimize pain, follow your bliss. This sounds compassionate, but it's actually cruel because it promises that meaning should come easily. Frankl would see this as a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. Meaning isn't found in the absence of struggle, it's forged in the struggle itself. The real trap isn't that life is hard. The trap is pursuing a comfort that numbs you to your calling. You can spend decades building a cushion between yourself and difficulty, only to realize you've also built a wall between yourself and meaning. Frankl offered something radically different. Embrace the tension. Accept the calling, step onto the rope. Because the only thing more painful than pursuing your purpose is living without one. If this content is resonating with you, click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for your support. This brings us to the question that haunted Frankl and should haunt all of us. What happens when you finally stop running from the purpose that terrifies you? The culture tells you that discovering your purpose should be a moment of clarity, an epiphany that arrives fully formed. But Frankl's life tells a different story. His masterwork, Man's Search for Meaning, wasn't born from inspiration. It was reconstructed from memory and the wreckage of liberation. He had written a manuscript before the camps, hidden it in his coat, only to have it confiscated immediately upon arrival at Auschwitz. Everything he had worked for, gone. Yet this loss became the crucible for something greater. Frankl began writing his ideas on scraps of paper stolen from the camp office. He had no guarantee of survival, no assurance anyone would ever read his words. But the act of reconstructing his work became a lifeline, a way to preserve meaning in a place designed to destroy it. He wasn't writing to become famous or successful. He was writing because the ideas demanded to exist, because his purpose pulled him forward, even when death seemed certain. After liberation, Frankl faced a choice many survivors couldn't bear. Return to a world that had continued without you, that couldn't possibly understand what you'd experienced. He could have withdrawn, spent his life processing trauma, focused on healing. Instead, he threw himself into work. In 9 days, he dictated the first draft of Man's Search for Meaning, not because he was superhuman, but because the work gave him a reason to endure. This wasn't a romantic journey of self-discovery. It was often brutal, lonely, misunderstood. Frankl developed logotherapy not in the comfort of academic contemplation, but in the urgency of existential crisis. He saw people dying around him not from starvation or disease alone, but from the loss of hope. He watched friends give up the moment they lost their reason to live. The work was forged in necessity, not preference. Here's what emerges when you stop fleeing your purpose: the confrontation with your freedom. Frankl understood that we fear freedom more than we fear constraint. Constraint gives us something to blame for our unhappiness. Freedom demands we take responsibility for our choices, our meaning, our lives. When you pursue your purpose, you can't blame circumstances anymore. You become the author of your story, which is both terrifying and liberating. The process requires what Frankl called self-transcendence, the capacity to look beyond yourself towards something greater. This isn't selflessness in the conventional sense. It's the recognition that you become most fully yourself, not through self-focus, but through dedication to something beyond yourself. Your purpose exists outside you, waiting to be discovered and fulfilled. You don't create it through introspection. You find it through engagement with the world. According to Frankl, 3 elements make this work effective: responsibility, consciousness, and conscience. You must take responsibility for discovering your unique meaning. No one can do it for you. You must become conscious of the specific tasks life presents you. Your purpose isn't generic, it's utterly particular to you. And you must listen to your conscience, that quiet voice that knows when you're living authentically and when you're running away. This leads to a practical framework, a way to navigate the tension between who you are and who you're called to become. It's not about dramatic transformation or sudden revelation. It's about consistent alignment of your daily choices with the meaning that calls you forward. The question isn't whether you'll face the battle between your current self and your potential self. You're already in it. The question is whether you'll acknowledge it, whether you'll step onto that rope stretched across the chasm, or spend your life pretending you don't see it while the tension tears you apart from the inside. Frankl would tell you this: the rope is always there, the chasm is always waiting, and every day you delay is a day you choose comfort over meaning, safety over significance. The real danger isn't that you'll fall, it's that you'll never try to cross. Frankl rebuilt his life's work from memory not because it was easy, but because meaning demanded it. He spent the rest of his life helping others discover their unique purpose, not because he was compensated adequately, but because the work itself was the compensation. This is what pursuing purpose looks like. Not a path away from difficulty, but a path through difficulty towards something that makes the difficulty worthwhile. But knowing you should pursue meaning and actually doing it are separated by a vast psychological distance. Frankl understood this better than anyone. He knew that most people avoid their purpose not because they're weak, but because accepting your calling means accepting a burden. It means acknowledging that you have specific gifts, specific tasks, specific responsibilities that only you can fulfill. It means you can't hide anymore. Let's make this concrete, because Frankl wasn't interested in abstract philosophy. He wanted practical tools for people facing real existential crises. He identified what he called the 3 sources of meaning, and understanding them changes everything about how you approach life. These aren't inspirational platitudes. They're the difference between surviving your circumstances and being destroyed by them. The first source is meaning through work, specifically through creative or productive endeavor. But Frankl wasn't talking about any work. He meant work that expresses something unique to you, work that contributes something only you can contribute. This could be art, science, craft, service. The content matters less than the authenticity. When you engage in work that manifests your unique capacities, you touch something transcendent. You become a channel for meaning to enter the world. The second source is meaning through love, the capacity to encounter another person in their full humanity and uniqueness. Frankl discovered this in the camps when he would conjure his wife's image in his mind, holding conversations with her, drawing strength from the love they shared. He later learned she had died months earlier. Yet the meaning he found in that love sustained him anyway, because love transcends even death. It's not dependent on reciprocation or outcome. It's found in the depth of your capacity to truly see another person. The third source, and this is where Frankl's thinking becomes radical, is meaning through suffering. Not seeking suffering, not glorifying it, but finding meaning within suffering that's unavoidable. When you can't change your circumstances, the last freedom remaining is your attitude toward those circumstances. Frankl watched fellow prisoners choose compassion over cruelty, dignity over degradation, even in conditions designed to make them animals. This choosing, this maintenance of inner freedom, even when outer freedom is gone, creates profound meaning. The fourth pillar Frankl would add to any practical framework is this: the meaning of the moment. Your purpose isn't just a distant goal. It's present in each situation life presents you. There's always a question being asked of you. What does this moment require? What meaning can be found here? The person who masters this sees life not as a series of random events, but as a continuous conversation between themselves and existence. Connect this to Frankl's biography, and you see the pattern. After liberation, he could have retired, focused on recovery, lived quietly. Instead, he chose to teach, to write, to help others find meaning. He traveled the world giving lectures well into his 90s, not because he needed to prove himself, but because the work still called him. He found meaning in creative work, in the love he rebuilt after loss, in the suffering he had endured and transformed, and in each moment's demand for response. But, and this is crucial, none of this works if you approach it as a technique for feeling better. Frankl was adamant about this. The moment you pursue meaning as a means to happiness, you've missed the point entirely. Meaning isn't a path to happiness. Happiness is the byproduct of meaningful living. This reversal is everything. You must be willing to accept that pursuing your purpose might not make you comfortable. It might cost you relationships with people who prefer the old you. It might require you to leave behind securities you've built. It might demand you face parts of yourself you've avoided. The question isn't whether it will be comfortable, the question is whether it will be meaningful. This brings us to the confrontation you've been avoiding, the one that waits for everyone who steps onto that rope between who they are and who they could become. Because once you start living for meaning rather than comfort, everything changes, including you. And change, even positive change, requires you to die to who you were. The transformation Frankl described isn't gentle. It's not the smooth evolution promised by self-help culture. It's the kind of change that requires everything you think you know about yourself to be questioned, tested, potentially destroyed. And this is where most people turn back. Imagine the moment of decision. You've identified your purpose, you understand what's being asked of you, you even have the tools to begin. Then comes the silence. The moment between acknowledgement and action. In that silence, every fear you've ever had about yourself rises to the surface. Who am I to pursue this? What if I fail? What if I succeed and discover it wasn't what I thought? What if I'm not strong enough, talented enough, worthy enough. Frankl would recognize this moment immediately. This is the test that determines everything. Because the real obstacle isn't external circumstances, it's your willingness to embrace responsibility for your own existence. In the camps, he observed that the prisoners who maintained their humanity weren't those with the best conditions. They were those who accepted that even in hell, they still had choices about who they would be. The psychological pain that emerges here is acute and specific. It's the pain of recognizing that you've been complicit in your own meaninglessness, that the years spent in comfortable distraction were years you chose, that the purpose calling you forward has been calling all along and you've been pretending not to hear. This realization can be crushing. You've wasted time, energy, life itself on paths that led nowhere meaningful. Your mind will offer 1,000 escape routes. Maybe this isn't really your purpose. Maybe you should wait until you're more prepared. Maybe you should try a safer, more moderate approach first. These thoughts aren't wisdom. They're your psyche's defense against transformation. Because transformation requires something die, and the part of you invested in staying the same will fight for survival. But if you resist the escape, if you stay present with the discomfort, something breaks open. Frankl described this as the moment when you stop asking what you can expect from life and start asking what life expects from you. This shift reverses everything. You're no longer the center of your own story. You're a response to a question being asked of you by existence itself. According to Frankl, this is when you discover your irreplaceability. Your purpose isn't generic, it's utterly specific to you. No one else can fulfill it. No one else has your exact combination of gifts, experiences, sensitivities, and circumstances. The universe has conspired to create one person capable of this particular contribution, you. Accepting this isn't arrogance. It's taking responsibility for your existence. The insights that emerge from this confrontation are often unexpected. You realize that you've been afraid not of failure, but of success, of what it would mean to actually fulfill your potential. You understand that comfort was never going to satisfy you because you weren't built for comfort. You see that the suffering you've experienced wasn't meaningless. It equipped you for the very purpose you're now being called to embrace. Frankl witnessed this pattern repeatedly. People would come to him broken by circumstances, convinced their lives were over. Through logotherapy, they would discover that their suffering had prepared them for something specific, perhaps to help others facing similar trials, perhaps to create something that could only emerge from such depths. Their pain became the raw material for purpose. Here's the paradox that stops most people. Accepting your purpose doesn't eliminate suffering. It transforms your relationship with it. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what for? You stop trying to escape discomfort and start asking what it's teaching you. The suffering doesn't disappear, but it becomes bearable because it's meaningful. Think of it as psychological alchemy. The same circumstances that crush one person forge another. The difference is meaning. When you know why you're suffering, when you can connect your pain to a larger purpose, you access reserves of strength you didn't know existed. This isn't about being strong, it's about being aligned. The transformation Frankl described requires you to embrace a truth that culture desperately wants you to ignore. Life doesn't owe you comfort, it doesn't owe you ease. What it offers is the opportunity to become who you're capable of being through the challenges it presents. This is a harder but more honest vision of human existence. What emerges on the other side of this confrontation isn't a new you, it's the real you. Freed from the false selves you built for protection and approval. It's you without the masks, without the compromises, without the excuses. And this person, this authentic self, is both terrifying and necessary. The process is slow. Don't expect sudden transformation. Frankl would tell you that meaning unfolds through consistent choices, day after day, moment after moment. Each time you choose your purpose over comfort, each time you respond to life's demands rather than your ego's preferences, you strengthen the connection between who you are and who you're becoming. One day, often without dramatic announcement, you realize you've crossed. The person you were, the one who ran from purpose, who prioritized safety over significance, that person doesn't live here anymore. You can't go back because you've fundamentally changed. You see with different eyes. You value different things. You've been reborn into a life organized around meaning rather than avoidance. But this rebirth brings its own challenges. Because the world you return to hasn't changed, you have. And now you must live as a transformed person in an unchanged world. The transformation happens gradually, so gradually you might not notice the shift. You wake up one day and realize the questions that used to torment you have dissolved. Not because you found answers, but because you stopped asking the wrong questions. You're no longer wondering if your life has purpose, you're living it. You're no longer debating whether to pursue your calling, you're responding to it daily. When you reappear in the world after this internal transformation, something ironic happens. The people who know you often don't recognize what's changed. They see the same face, hear the same voice, but something fundamental is different. You carry yourself differently. You make decisions from a different center. Where you once sought approval, you now seek alignment. Where you once feared judgment, you now trust your inner compass. People find this transformation disturbing, even threatening, not because you've become arrogant or withdrawn, but because your presence reminds them of possibilities they've abandoned in themselves. When someone stops seeking external validation and starts living from internal meaning, it challenges everyone around them to examine their own choices. Your transformation becomes a mirror they'd rather not look into. For the world, your rebirth is often an anticlimax. There's no dramatic announcement, no public declaration. You simply stop participating in the same patterns. You stop pretending that achievements will fill the void. You stop medicating your existential hunger with distractions. You just quietly begin living in alignment with your purpose. And to most people, this looks like nothing at all. But for you, everything has changed. You return to the same circumstances, maybe the same job, same city, same relationships, but you inhabit them completely differently. What once felt like obligations now feel like opportunities to express your unique meaning. What once drained you now energizes you because you understand how it connects to your larger purpose. Frankl observed this pattern in survivors who successfully reintegrated into life. They didn't return unchanged. That would have been impossible. They returned carrying something forged in darkness, a bone-deep understanding that meaning transcends circumstances. They had discovered what Frankl called the tragic optimism, the capacity to maintain yes to life despite suffering, guilt, and death. This wasn't naivety, it was hard-won wisdom. The authentic return means you're no longer performing life. You're living it. You're not trying to convince anyone of anything. You're not seeking recognition for your transformation. You're simply present, aligned, purposeful. And paradoxically, this often makes you more effective in the world, not less, because you're no longer operating from need, but from overflow. According to Frankl, a genuine transformation is marked by self-transcendence. You become less focused on yourself and more focused on what you can contribute. This isn't selflessness in the sense of self-denial. It's the recognition that you become most fully yourself, not through self-obsession, but through dedication to something beyond yourself. Your purpose calls you out of yourself and into fuller being. You don't need to prove you've changed. The change shows itself in 1,000 subtle ways. The way you respond to setbacks, the choices you make when no one's watching, the things you no longer tolerate in yourself, the standards you hold yourself to, not from obligation, but from love of the work. This authentic transformation doesn't announce itself, it demonstrates itself. Think of it like this. Before, you were a person asking, "What can I get from life?" Now you're a person asking, "What does life ask of me?" This reversal changes everything. Challenges stop being obstacles to your happiness and become invitations to manifest your purpose. Relationships stop being sources of validation and become opportunities for genuine encounter. Work stops being a means to an end and becomes an end in itself when it expresses your unique meaning. The irony Frankl witnessed again and again. The people most concerned with finding happiness rarely find it, while those dedicated to meaningful purpose often discover happiness as an unexpected byproduct. You can't pursue happiness directly. It emerges from living in alignment with your deepest values and responding to life's demands with your full being. What ripples out from this transformation isn't always visible, but it's profound. When one person stops living in bad faith, stops pretending, stops running from their purpose, it creates permission for others to do the same. You don't need to preach or convince. Your existence becomes the message. Your life becomes evidence that meaning is possible, that authenticity is achievable, that purpose can be found even, especially, in suffering. Frankl spent the rest of his life embodying this principle. He didn't just teach logotherapy, he lived it. Every lecture, every patient, every book was an expression of the meaning he discovered in the camps. He transformed unspeakable suffering into a contribution that has helped millions discover their own purpose. This is what authentic return looks like, taking your deepest pain and transforming it into your greatest gift. But the transformation isn't finished. It never is. There's always deeper alignment possible, always more meaning to discover, always new demands life makes of you. This isn't exhausting when you're living from purpose. It's energizing because you're not trying to arrive at some final destination. You're engaged in the ongoing conversation between who you are and who you're becoming. This brings us to the question that ultimately determines the quality of your existence. Will you accept the burden of your unique purpose? Or will you spend your life in quiet desperation, running from the very thing that could make your life meaningful? Here's what makes this choice so difficult. Accepting your purpose means accepting your freedom. And freedom, as Frankl understood better than almost anyone, is terrifying. Because freedom means responsibility. It means you can't blame circumstances for your meaninglessness anymore. It means you must acknowledge that you have specific tasks only you can fulfill, specific contributions only you can make. The courage to pursue purpose isn't about fearlessness, it's about moving forward despite fear. It's understanding that the discomfort of pursuing your calling is fundamentally different from the despair of avoiding it. One type of difficulty builds you, the other type erodes you. One connects you to something larger, the other isolates you in your own avoidance. Frankl described this as an alchemical process, transforming the lead of suffering into the gold of meaning. You take the very experiences that could destroy you, loss, pain, failure, limitation, and you ask a different question about them. Not, why did this happen to me, but what does this enable me to do? Who am I being called to become through this? According to Frankl's deepest understanding, we discover our freedom not in the absence of constraints, but in our response to unavoidable suffering. The prisoner who chooses dignity over degradation in the camps, the patient who finds meaning in terminal illness, the person who transforms their greatest wound into their deepest wisdom, these are the ones who understand freedom in its truest sense. Freedom in Frankl's vision means freedom to take responsibility for your existence. It means recognizing that between stimulus and response there's a space, and in that space lies your power to choose. Not always to choose your circumstances, but always to choose your attitude, your response, your meaning. This is the freedom that can't be taken from you, even in the most extreme conditions. The best version of yourself isn't some idealized fantasy. It's the person who fully accepts their responsibility to respond to life's demands. It's the person who stops asking what they want from life and starts asking what life wants from them. It's the person who has discovered their irreplaceable purpose and dedicates themselves to fulfilling it. Not perfectly, but faithfully. This person carries a different quality of presence. They're grounded in something beyond circumstances, beyond mood, beyond the approval or disapproval of others. They've touched something transcendent, not in a religious sense necessarily, but in the sense of connecting to meaning larger than personal comfort or success. They've answered the question of their existence not with words, but with the way they live. This isn't the end of struggle. If anything, it's the beginning of meaningful struggle, because now you're engaged in work that matters, pursuing purposes that challenge you, manifesting potentials that demand everything you have. But this type of difficulty is utterly different from the quiet desperation of meaninglessness. One exhausts you. The other paradoxically energizes you even in exhaustion. What would change in your life if you stopped running from your purpose and started walking toward it? What would it mean to organize your existence around the question, what does life ask of me, rather than what do I want from life? Frankl would tell you that these questions can't be answered abstractly, only lived. The meaning of your life isn't discovered through contemplation alone, but through the concrete actions you take in response to the specific situations you face. Your purpose unfolds through engagement, through the daily choice to respond to life's demands with your full being rather than your defended ego. If this video challenged your assumptions about meaning and purpose, or made you question how you're currently living, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the human psyche through Viktor Frankl. Until the next video.